Hey everyone, I'm Josh.
And I'm Taylor.
We're a travel-loving couple who have been on over 26 cruises, sailed 19 different ships, and explored 51 ports of call across 24 countries.
We're here to help you plan unforgettable cruise vacations with expert tips, real experiences, and everything you need to know before you set sail.
So whether you're a first-time cruiser or a seasoned sailor, we've got you covered.
If that sounds like your kind of adventure, be sure to like this episode and subscribe for more cruise tips, destination guides, and travel inspiration.
Now, let's get cruising. What's going on, everyone? My name is Josh.
And my name is Taylor.
Welcome back to another Travel with Josh and Taylor cruise podcast. Unfortunately, we're not on a cruise right now.
No, but I actually was just thinking about it. We have 6 cruises booked right now.
We do, and I don't even think that we've...
I don't know how it happened.
We haven't even revealed all of those to our YouTube members yet. So...
We haven't?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, well...
2 of them have not yet been revealed. So,
okay.
yeah. So, I don't think I can really talk much more about it, but...
No, yeah.
So... we are continuing our series of first-time cruisers here, thinking about, as a first-time cruiser, planning a cruise yourself. Now, obviously, if you don't want to have the stress and struggle of figuring those things out, you can always use a travel planner with Goldgell Getaways by heading on over to goldgellgetaways.com and start planning today. There's a button there.
And
right?
even if you know how to book your own vacations, use a travel agent anyway because it's free. It doesn't cost you anything extra.
It doesn't cost
And they're
you.
just there to help you. So if you still want to plan every single aspect of your cruise, just have the travel agent there for just in case.
Yeah, it's
the best way to do it, I'm telling you.
It's super helpful. Taylor has clients. You can also work one-on-one with Taylor if you'd like for a cruise. Taylor's had clients before where they say, I don't even know why I don't even think I need a travel agent. And then
literally
sure
on
enough,
day 1 of the trip,
sure
I'm
enough,
getting lots of emails.
they needed a travel agent. So,
Yes.
but yeah, so today we would talk about kind of the process of booking the cruise, right? The timeline. What is it that you need to know? When should I book a cruise? You know, should I book it 2 years in advance if I can? Should I wait and book it last minute? This is actually a question that gets asked a lot, especially for Taylor. I think when clients come to her and ask her questions like this, you know, sometimes they're looking to do Alaska and they're looking to book Alaska, you know, for sometime in July and it's April, right? Kind of last minute. It's going to be expensive. You're going to miss out on activities and things like that. So that's what we're going to break into a little bit today.
We are.
I was kind of throwing that over to Taylor, hoping that she would
Were you?
take that away, but I guess she didn't.
Take it away, or...
Still not taking it away.
Nope.
So why does timing matter so much when it comes to cruising? And really, this is a, you know, if you think about it, this is kind of like a travel industry thing. Like it's a standard thing across the board, right? Taylor and I do this stuff even when we don't do cruises. When we did Scotland last year, this kind of timing process is something that has to be considered anytime that you're doing a trip, right? Most of the time, your trip is going to be cheapest the sooner you book it with the time in advance, right? So we're specifically talking about cruising. You know, the further that you can book that cruise out, normally, the cheaper it's going to be.
Normally, yes. And I say that because on the occasion, a promotion comes out that was better than what you originally booked. On the occasion, not every time. Sometimes, and that could be, 6 months to a year before your cruise and you booked 12 to 18 months in advance. That promotion could be better than what you actually booked initially. But if you use a travel agent and that promotion is actually better, we can apply that for you and get you that money taken off your final balance.
Yeah, so,
But still, best to book as far in advance as possible to be able to take advantage of stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when it comes to the money that you're going to spend, not everybody, I think, probably watching this podcast has the ability to just spend money however they want, right? Taylor and I are definitely not part of that. So we do have to, structure the way that we spend our money and be a little bit more frugal sometimes. We can't just necessarily on a whim book a cruise for next week.
No.
That's full price. So timing is really important when you're booking a cruise. And that is not only necessarily of the price, but also think about cabin location, dining options, excursions, right? If you book something super short in advance, you're probably going to have less options during that sailing. And I think that was, we've talked about this many times. We did this in Alaska when we sailed on the Norwegian Encore. Mm-hmm. We did that. That was super last minute. And the cruise that we just did in Japan with Princess.
Yeah.
Super last minute. And what do I mean by super last minute? Meaning that we booked those cruises about 60 days or less before sailing, right? Yeah. And so why is that important? Why does that matter? Because
if there's still availability, why does it matter? You can still get on the ship.
Sure.
The reason it matters is because of everything else that's on board or excursions that you might not get to take advantage of, right? Because they're sold out at that point. So, oh my gosh, there's so much that I could talk about with this, but I don't know how deep you want me to dive into this. Just with booking windows is like a super important thing that I think maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. But that is sometimes can make or break if you get to do anything on your sailing. Because with some cruise lines, as soon as you pay your deposit, you can get in and you can start booking stuff if it's available. You can book excursions, you can book specialty dining, all of those extra amenity things, spa packages, cabanas on the private islands, all those sorts of things. But other cruise lines, you might not be able to do it right when you book the cruise, but there is a certain time period as to when those things are released. And if you book after that, they are going to be sold out or close to sold out. So something else to consider if you are going to wait last minute. You might not get to do everything that you wanted to do on that sailing.
Right.
So in those instances, that's when I would pick a ship over the itinerary, because then you can just enjoy what is included on the ship and that you don't have to reserve or pay extra for other things.
Yeah, I mean, if you've listened to the previous episodes where we've talked about first-time cruising, some of these things are going to be reiterated time and time again, because they are important when it comes to deciding a cruise. But I think the one thing that Taylor and I really try to harp on a lot is the experience in which you're going to have.
Yes.
Right? So if you are looking to just try and get the cheapest thing possible or whatever, you're not necessarily going to have the best experience. I mean, you certainly can still have a great time. You can make the best of the situation, but
cheaper's not always better.
Right. You're not necessarily going to probably have that, the classic Instagram versus reality kind of concept, right? Of what you see is not necessarily what you're going to get. So it is important. Taylor mentioned pricing as far as perks or discounts or other things like that. Something that we talk about occasionally is the fact that closer to a ship's sailing date, they will run these promotions that you might see 50% off, but that 50% off doesn't necessarily mean that it's cheaper than what you would have booked 18 months in advance.
Because the price of your room before that 50% off, when you booked at least a year ago, it's going to have increased. So say your room was like, I don't know, $1,000 per person for your balcony room, but now they're offering 50% off. Well, that doesn't mean it's still $1,000 per person for that balcony room. It might be $2,000 or $3,000 per person for that balcony room now. And then you're getting 50% off. You'd still be paying way more money booking last minute than you would have previously.
Right. It's dynamic pricing. So essentially it's just based on, the demand. Are there more people interested in this particular itinerary that it's driving the price up? Is this an itinerary that's not doing very well? It's going to drive the price down. And in some cases, there are times when, when you book 18 months in advance, and we're 6 months or less before the sailing, and the price may go down below that what you booked previously. It does happen, but it's rare, especially now coming out of 2020. Cruising, I said this in a previous podcast episode, cruising is honestly, I think it's in one of the most highest demand
It is.
sectors of within
It made
travel.
a crazy comeback.
Yeah, I mean, it's the ships are selling out like never before. We're seeing less and less,
Ships are selling out, and there's still more ships coming into
Right.
the fleets of every cruise line.
Yeah.
And they're all still selling.
Yeah, we're seeing less and less travel agent rates, because normally cruises will give travel agent rates for us to experience on sailings that aren't doing that well, in an effort to try and fill those rooms, kind of make at least break even on some of that stuff,
Yeah.
but then give us the experience to sell it
Yes.
to other people.
Exactly. Yep.
So, so that's kind of why timing really matters. It is important.
Well, and we were talking about pricing, and I've had multiple conversations with people, and they say, well, whenever there's less rooms on the ship, isn't it going to be cheaper because they're just trying to sell it out? And that's not how that works at all. When there's only a few rooms left on a ship and they're trying to sell that out, they won't necessarily drop that price.
Right.
They're going to be like, this ship's almost full. We're cranking that price up. And if these people want to join, they're going to pay premium
Right.
rates for this.
And with some cruise lines, which we'll talk about this here in a moment, they will open that up to their own crew members.
Yes.
For
And, like,
family to come on
families,
board.
yes.
They'll open that up to travel agents like us. So that's something that you need to think about. Disney specifically will open that up to cast members, right?
Yes.
So cast members who work in Walt Disney World and Disneyland,
they don't get much time for planning, but
No,
they
they
open it
don't.
up for them.
but they will have the opportunity to book at a discounted rate before that goes out to the public or gets discounted to the public.
Yes.
So that's why timing's important. If you're wondering, why it matters, that's why it matters. Mostly it's the price, but also think about the activities that you're missing out on. So, and before we kind of move on a little bit, when we did the Diamond Princess here last month in April, that was specifically like a travel agent type of thing. So it was super last minute, 60 days or less. Actually, I think we booked it right at 60 days. So there were plenty of excursions that we did not get to do that we really would have liked to have done.
I thought you were about to say there were plenty of excursions available. I'm like, bro, there were not.
Right.
The way you worded that was not the right way.
There wasn't that much that was available. Also, the room categories were limited, right? So that's the other thing. All of the suites, not that we needed to get a suite, but all of the suites, mini suites, those were all booked up. They only had a very few balcony staterooms that were available. So Taylor and I, we actually had booked that with an inside. That was mostly what was left. And we were super lucky to get upgraded to an ocean view.
Yes.
So
this is something to keep in mind. If you really don't want to pay that premium price or whatever for a higher room category, something that you can always do, you can't rely on this to actually happen, but something that you can do in hopes that maybe it does, because it has worked for us I think we've done it 2 or 3 times. It's happened. Not every cruise line does this, but a handful of them do. So we booked an interior room on this Princess cruise, and then we were able to bid money to upgrade. Now, you don't get charged that money unless you are given your upgrade. So we were booked an interior, and we had bid for an ocean view.
Right.
Because we at least wanted like a window. And I think, what did you say it was? Like 99? You bid like 99? Or
yeah, I think it was like super cheap. It was like $100.
a person or total?
No, it was like $100 per person, I think.
Yeah,
So I think we spent
$100
like-
per person, roughly. And this varies from cruise to cruise, from room category to room category.
Right.
All of that. We bid roughly $100 per person, and then we got that upgrade, which is way less than what we would have paid if we would have actually booked that ocean view room. So that's something that you can consider, but don't
rely on it.
Don't book an interior room and be like, oh, I'm upgrading to a balcony by bidding, because they might be sold out of balconies, and you might not even be able to bid to upgrade to a balcony. But just something to keep in mind. If you do really want to stick to a budget and you're like, well, maybe I do want a room with a balcony or an ocean view, you can at least try to bid.
Right.
And then not have to pay as much, and then still get to, enjoy that cruise experience, even though you got the interior room. But let me tell you, you ain't gonna spend much time in that room anyway.
Right. So, with that being said, let's talk about booking windows for cruises in general. And what I mean by that is specifically thinking about what you want to do for your cruise itinerary and the length of time that you should really be thinking about that, or the thing ahead of time of when you should be looking at that for that itinerary, right? So, the main cruise lines that I think most everybody knows is going to be Norwegian, Royal Caribbean, and Carnival. Now, Taylor and I, we actually just had a comment the other day. I think it was on like the Norwegian Prima video that I made.
Maybe. You get lots of comments on that one for some reason, and I don't understand
I do,
it.
but it had nothing to do with Norwegian. It had everything to do with Carnival, and why I don't include Carnival when we talk about cruise lines. And really, the basic reason is because we've never sailed Carnival before.
No, we haven't.
It has a reputation that seemingly is not something that interests us, but I've said that the new private destination beach, whatever they're calling it,
does look very cool.
Does look cool, so we might jump on a Carnival ship just to...
It's not one of the 6 that we have booked, so don't get any ideas.
It's not. It's not. But with that being said...
If we do, though, we have to call Chris and Sarah because they would be like, we have to go.
Yes. I don't know, but Chris has been saying he's not so much a Carnival person anymore. So.
Yeah, we got him out of his shell.
So with that being said, there are specific times when you do want to try and book as early as possible, and those are holiday times. And those holiday times also include things like spring break.
Yes, so like if you're planning on cruising during spring break or over Christmas or even over the summer, like 4th of July or something, because that's when you have, you can get the most time off work, or like kids aren't in school or college is on break, whatever. You just have to plan further in advance for those. What are you
You're
reading?
fine. I'm just looking at my thing.
It stresses me out.
Okay. You don't have to let it stress you out. Continue.
Well, it does. Because I feel like you don't know what I'm saying.
No, I'm listening.
But anyway, if you're planning to sail over some sort of holiday, those are the times that you need to plan as far in advance as possible for booking, because those are sailings that are going to sell out, because think of how many other people are in the same situation as you, that is the time that they have off, and that is the time that they can go on vacation.
Yeah, and I know that like spring break kind of changes a little bit every year, so maybe you can't book that 18 months in advance, but you certainly want to be thinking about like when the school year starts, if I'm going to take my kids on spring break, as soon as you figure out what that schedule is, that's when you need to start looking like, okay, I need to book now, because most cruise lines are, looking for final payment sometimes 3 months in advance.
Yes, multiple cruise lines, the final payment date's 120 days in advance.
So
if you book it 120 days or less in advance, you have to pay in full. You can't make payments.
Right. 3 months in advance, though, is 90 days.
Oh, some are more. So
Yeah.
then, yes, sorry.
But with that being said,
120 is Norwegian for sure.
Right. With that being said, though, you definitely want to make sure that you're getting that as soon as possible. And then the other thing too is that, like,
You gave me a dirty look about 90 days.
Something we always recommend is to get insurance, so that in the off chance, if you do need to cancel, or maybe there does happen to be a better deal with another cruise line, whatever, you can cancel, get your money back, rebook, do whatever those things are. So make sure that at the end of the day, when you're budgeting for your cruise, make sure that you're including in that budget trip insurance, specifically for that. Probably not with the cruise line, because it's not usually the greatest. A third party is better.
Yeah,
but
we at Goldgell Getaways, we have like 2 or 3 different third party agencies that we work with for travel insurance. We actually used one of them we have annual travel insurance. That way we don't have to pay every single time we go on a trip to just get travel insurance. We have it that covers us for the year, starting on like the day that we purchased until that next the following year, and then we'll have to get it again. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Now, thinking about booking windows, what makes Disney very unique is that you can book activities.
whoa, hold on.
Well,
What kind of booking windows are we talking about here? I thought we were talking about when you're booking a sailing, not booking activities,
that's
because those are two different booking windows.
right. Royal Caribbean, as soon as you book your room and pay your
We
deposit.
didn't say. I mean, I said that earlier, but
Okay, yeah.
I just want to make sure we're on the same page, because now I'm getting confused, because I thought we were talking about at what time frame should you book a cruise. That's what I was reading on here.
Right. And we just talked about Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, and Carnival, right? So the unique thing about Disney is that Disney does not ever, like on an exceptionally rare occasion, they may run a special for discounted itinerary.
Oh, hold on. They did just have a really good special, and I had a lot of people take advantage of it, and I don't know if we'll ever see it again, was they did a 10% deposit instead of a 20% deposit.
So, and that's really interesting that you bring that up, because while almost every other cruise line, major cruise line, Norwegian, Royal, Carnival, etc., when they run specials, usually their specials are, 50% off, 20% off the third and
Kids
fourth
sail
guest,
free,
blah, blah, blah.
whatever.
Things like that. Disney does not run that type of discount.
No.
Because Disney, number one, does not have the amount of ships in their fleet that other cruise lines do. Think about, somebody tried to tell me the other day that Carnival has the most ships in their fleet. Actually, Royal Caribbean has more ships in their fleet, just within the Royal Caribbean brand, not including...
Yes. I was going to say, they could say that if Carnival's
Right.
counting all of their,
Right.
Other companies that they own.
But Disney only has currently sailing. We're looking at 6 ships, soon to be 7, with the Destiny in
And
the
the
Western.
Adventure, so 8.
Only in the Western Hemisphere. Adventure is in the Eastern Hemisphere.
guess.
I don't include that.
It doesn't count, I guess.
Doesn't count.
Well,
It's
technically,
not a
Disney
real.
didn't even build it.
It's not a real Disney ship. No, it is. Don't jump on me in comments. But
Taylor wants to go on it, so.
basically, what I'm saying is that Disney does not have to run these specials, because since they have such few ships, they are in such high demand. It's very, very rare that they need any help in really selling out their ships. But what they will do, in order to try and get people to book a little quicker on the decision making, is reduce the deposit, right?
Yes.
Because for Disney, compared to, let's say, a 7-night sailing on the Disney Treasure and a 7-night sailing on Utopia of the Seas with Royal Caribbean.
Utopia of the Seas doesn't do 7-night sailings.
I knew Taylor was going to do that as soon as I said that. Regardless.
Wonder of the Seas, Icon of the Seas.
Wonder of the
There's
Seas.
7
There we
nights.
go. Let's do Icon because it's new.
Yeah.
Treasure's new. Right. The price difference there is astronomical. Disney is going to probably be for 2 people in a balcony stateroom,
Like 7,000,
$7,000.
depending how far in advance you book.
Icon of the Seas,
Probably 5 or 6, honestly.
I would say if you find it at the right time, it's going to be
It'd
as
be
low
4.
as 4.
Yeah.
Now, Royal Caribbean doesn't include soda. Disney does. Okay, so what? You buy a soda package, it's still going to come in cheaper than Disney. But essentially, the point that I'm trying to make here is that the deposit for that sailing, for a $7,000 sailing, is 20%. So you have to pay 20% of that. So that's over $1,000 you have to put down on a deposit.
This is what, like
just for 2
$1,400
people.
bucks or something?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
for 2 people for Disney. So what they do instead is they'll do this special where they run 10%, right? So now instead of paying $1,400 bucks, you only have to spend like $700 bucks, right? And so
Or they'll do Disney Visa members get 10% deposit.
There you
Or
go.
Disney,
Yeah.
if you have a Disney Plus account, then you get a 10% deposit, or
Yeah.
something like that.
So it's interesting that Disney does that, but thinking about that, when you're planning your Disney cruise, you shouldn't be waiting for that type of special to come across for you to book it.
No, not
because
worth it.
think about it.
You're still paying the same price no matter what.
Well, you could be paying more.
You could be paying more.
Still, you could still be paying more, right?
Yeah.
Even if you paid 20% and you booked 18 months in advance, let's say if you waited for that sailing and it's a 10% now for a deposit, but the price has gone up by a couple $1,000s, because it will.
It will.
We've seen it. You're still going to be paying more. So
yeah.
definitely, if you're thinking about taking a cruise on Disney, definitely take advantage of that. Sometimes they will put these restrictions, right? The sailing must be between such and such a time frame.
Yes, length. It must be booked within this certain window for sailings in this certain window
Right.
for sailings that are a certain length.
But I
they
think
do
last
put
time,
restrictions.
But I think this past time when they ran the special was basically like on any sailing.
It was on any sailing after like a certain date or something.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you could definitely take advantage of a cheap cruise price and get a good deposit rate.
That deposit, the 10% deposit has since ended for a while now.
Yeah.
So that
It's
was
not
just
running.
a deposit that had been on there. And when we're talking about deposits, I guess most of the other cruise lines, they do not do a 10 or 20% deposit. Norwegian Cruise Line is a $250 deposit. No matter
The price.
what cruise you're booking, no matter how much the cruise costs, $250 deposit, and it's refundable. And same thing, Disney's deposits, even though you're paying 20% deposit, their deposits are refundable if you decide to cancel before final payment date. Same thing
Right.
with Norwegian. Most of the other cruise lines, their deposits are not refundable, but they are still like on the lower end. So like,
Right.
I think last time I quoted Royal Caribbean, the deposit was $250 per person.
But you
So,
can do a refundable deposit with Royal.
You can, but
it's
then your
more.
overall price is going to be more.
Right.
Yeah.
So now, why I mention that and why I think it's important to mention that is because, as Taylor had mentioned previously, Norwegian, Royal Caribbean, when you book your cruise and you pay the deposit, whether it's 3 months in advance or 18 months in advance, as soon as you make that payment for the deposit and the reservation shows up, you can begin to book excursions. You can begin to book activities.
For what cruise line did you say?
Royal Caribbean, Norwegian.
Well, and like most other
Most cruise
cruise
lines,
lines.
yes.
Not Disney, for
Not
sure.
Disney, and that's why this is really important. Because
Actually,
Disney's-
not Virgin either.
Oh, Virgin. Well, we haven't sailed Virgin.
No, but I've
voyages.
been, I
So-
did all my training and everything. Virgin, you can't book any excursions or anything as soon as you book it and pay the deposit. That stuff's all closed off until like a certain date.
Right.
So same thing with Disney.
Yeah. And so that's why it's really important, too, to mention this with Disney, in that Disney, you do get a little bit more of a leeway in planning your cruise
Yeah.
if you don't book at that 18-month, or even sometimes 20. Like, I don't know if Disney's really doing 2 years in advance
No,
anymore.
they don't.
But it's
18
now
months at the
about,
very most.
I think it's 18, is about as far as they go.
The
But
very most. I think that's right.
Disney uses a tiered system. So if you have never sailed on Disney before, you will be some of the last people to get to our
Book activities.
right. And the most important thing there that most people get worked up about is the cabanas at Castaway Cay, and now probably even at
Lookout Key.
Lookout Key.
I actually, funny you say that. I just want to bring it up real quick. So your tiered memberships don't really matter on the other cruise lines as much as far as booking windows. It's literally like the sooner you book and pay that deposit, the sooner you get to book all of your activities
Right.
and plan the rest of your vacation out.
Right.
With Disney, then, it is based on your Castaway Club status. So every cruise line has your loyalty membership. For the cruise line, you're automatically enrolled after your first sailing.
Yeah.
And so Disney's is Castaway Club. They have Pearl, Platinum, Gold, and
Silver.
The poor Silver people and first-time sailors are the last people that get to book anything. So basically, you're never going to have a chance at getting a cabana unless somebody cancels.
Right.
Gold, I don't think we've ever, like in the time that we were Gold, I never
I'm not sure that
saw
we've ever
cabanas.
tried to get it, but I mean,
No.
I'm sure it's happened at some point.
But hold
maybe.
on, we're also Platinum now.
Right.
Our booking window is the same time. I can't remember if Concierge is with Platinum or Pearl. It's pretty early, but I'm not sure if it's the earliest. But when we just did our check-in for our upcoming Disney cruise not that long ago, there were no cabanas left. They were all completely sold out for Castaway Cay. So basically, you have to be a Pearl member, potentially Concierge, or be friends with somebody that's a Pearl member that can book a cabana.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you are not going to get one. The other things that people get worried about are Palo and Remy, because people like to eat there, just depending or Enchante, depending what ship you're on.
Right.
And those will all open based on your tier. So Pearl gets the prime pickings of everything they want, and then Platinum, then Gold, then Silver.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, we're talking about these booking windows and when to book and special celebrations, whatever. What's unique with Disney is that Disney also has themed cruises. So,
yeah, they do. Yep.
they'll have like Pixar Day at Sea.
They used to have Star Wars Day at Sea.
I think they're still doing Marvel.
They are still doing Marvel.
Occasionally. But, things like that are also events that will increase the price.
But also
Halloween
on the high seas and Mickey's Very Merry Time Christmas sailings. Those also cost more.
Also tend to drive the price up a little bit. So the earlier that you can find, the earlier that you can decide that you want to do something and book it, the better off you're going to be. And again, like I said, if you're not, let's say you're doing Royal Caribbean and it's a non-refundable deposit, make sure that you have some type of trip insurance that will allow you to, cancel and get your money back if you need to. But what's great with Disney is that if something changes, you can always cancel and get your money back as long as it is before the final payment date.
Yeah. So we're kind of just talking about booking windows real quick, because we mentioned the cabanas. So if you booked with on one of the other cruise lines, you would have to pay in full for that cabana as soon as you book it, or you won't get it.
This is actually something I don't like about Disney.
But then Disney, you don't get charged until you're actually on the ship.
Right.
And have done that experience.
Yeah,
you get charged like the day before or something.
I actually don't like that, and the reason I don't like that is because
for like mixology classes.
Well, yeah, I mean, like even for lots of things that are going on, even with excursions, right?
Oh, and Paolo and Remy too.
Yeah, when you don't have to pay for those things up front, essentially anybody can go in and book those things, and then just before, like the week before the sailing, you can go back in and then cancel those. Never have been charged. And so it kind of makes the planning a little bit more stressful, because then if there was something that you wanted to do, you definitely need to be on there literally checking all the time to see if somebody canceled. Does that still happen when you pay for those things up front? Yes, of course.
Yes, because you can pay on the other cruise lines, you can pay and then you can cancel and you will get refunded your money.
But I think that it happens far less on other cruise lines.
Agreed.
Because you have to make that commitment, right?
Yep.
It's just like when we, for us doing weddings, JTR Media,
shout out.
We have people who pay a deposit.
Shameless plug.
Because they're actually interested, right? They secure that deposit, which means that they're going to fulfill and have us capture the wedding. We've never had anybody cancel, but you know what I mean? Like you have to pay that amount to show that you're actually interested in doing it.
Well, our retainer's non-refundable in the contract.
Right, of course. So, but I do, I think it's a good point that Taylor brings up. That is one thing I don't like about Disney is how they operate that. It's not a terrible thing, but
it's nice. It's sort of nice to think about I don't have to pay for this right now, so I can just save up the money so that I can pay for it later. But then it's also people taking advantage of it.
Sure.
And just I'm going to book everything that I can possibly book, and then I'll decide later if I actually want to do this or not.
Right. So, yeah. So that's kind of some of the things to think about with the booking windows, why it's important with those booking windows, other things that are impacted by those windows, activities, whatnot. So let's talk a little bit about what happens. We've kind of treaded around this a little bit, but be very specific, as far as what happens when we book too late, or on the rare occasion if you're booking too early for a cruise, which really I don't really see any side effects or any downsides. Side effects. I don't see any downsides to booking your cruise too early.
No, because if you use a travel agent like at Goldgell Getaways, we watch prices and we watch promotions, and we can go in and check without having changed anything in your reservation to see if it brings your price down. I actually once saved a client over $1,000 on a cruise because there was a promotion that came out. They literally booked the cruise a couple days after they released the dates for a year and a half or more later. Booked the cruise for them. They had rebooked on board, got a deposit down, and then it was literally months and months and months later. There was a promotion that came out, and we were actually emailing back and forth. And I'm like, I better just check and make sure. And I checked a few things, and that promotion didn't really do anything. And then there was another promotion that came out not long after, and I double checked again, and it literally dropped their price over $1,000. And I was shook, because that does not, like, if it's going to drop the price, it's by like $50, $100.
Yeah, usually not
something
that much.
like that. Maybe it'll give them like an extra perk for on board or something, or like it'll add prepaid gratuities,
Right.
but like not dropping over $1,000. So when that happened, I was checking every single person's cruise, and like for every cruise line, not just Royal Caribbean. So I was like, this is insane. So there really is no downside to booking as far in advance as possible, but have somebody in your corner that's going to be checking those promotions just in case.
Absolutely. I think the other thing too that people may say is that, like, well, I just don't know with like life plans and things changing. Again, that's where having a travel agent is really nice, but also having trip insurance is also nice in case you do need to cancel or change something.
I was going to say the travel insurance.
It's really unfortunate situations that do happen. Taylor just had a client not that long ago who had a parent that actually passed away, like literally
right before their
like
cruise.
the day before they're supposed to get on the ship. So, instead of them having to navigate the waters with that whole situation, Taylor was there to kind of help walk them through kind of the step-by-step process of canceling and not being on the ship and getting a refund and yada, yada, yada. So it is nice to have that. But don't think that you can't book something 18 months in advance because you don't know what you're going to be doing in 12 months. I think that's probably the worst excuse that you could ever possibly have. To not have a great experience.
Yes.
You could lose your job tomorrow, right? You could book a cruise for next week and lose your job tomorrow. It doesn't matter, right? It's kind of the same thing where why
you just
not
gotta
just book
live.
it 18 months in
You just got to
advance?
go for it.
So
you can't sit at home and just be a nervous Nelly all the time and not live your life. So just plan it as far in advance as you can and have something to be looking forward to.
Yeah.
I was also going to say, I used to always say, because people in our family and friends that like don't really travel ever, they're always like, oh, I hope I have the opportunity to go there someday. And I used to always say like, oh, like make the opportunity to go there. Like it'll be so good. You can't wait for the opportunity to happen. You have to make it happen.
Right.
So don't just wait for things to come along and be like, oh, well, maybe we can do this. No, just do it. Plan it and make it happen for yourself.
Yeah. So booking a cruise too late. Some of the cons, some of the bad things, right? Higher prices are inevitable. Again, dynamic pricing is something that is actively being used at all times across all the cruise lines. They want to get as much money as they possibly can to make a profit and make sure that they can keep the ship clean and pay all of their staff.
Crew.
Yes, that's what I meant to say, the crew.
Josh likes to use the word staff.
Limited room choices, again. So when you book so last minute, sometimes you're going to be very limited on the cabin that you might want to get. If you're somebody who, you've done a cruise before and you liked having that balcony, but now you're kind of waiting for that last minute thing, thinking like, oh, I'll book last minute and I'll still be able to get a balcony. No, you might be stuck with an inside stateroom and that might not float very well for you.
And another thing that will affect not just getting closer to the cruise, but also the type of sailing. So I was actually just pricing out some cruises the other day for a New England, Canada sailing. Those are not year-round cruises with most cruise lines. Those are only happening like end of summer into beginning of fall because people want to go up and see the fall foliage, and that's when those sailings happen with the cruise lines. Because of that, because it's such a limited amount of a limited number of months that you can do those sailings, and those itineraries sometimes change from week to week, just based on trying to hit other ports and stuff. There is going to be limited availability, not just because you're getting closer to the sailing, but also because that sailing isn't a year-round sailing. So Caribbean and Bahamas, you can 100% book a last minute sailing and still get like
A decent deal,
as long
probably.
as you are not super picky about like the ship or the itinerary.
Right.
You can still do a cruise to the Caribbean and the Bahamas booking that super last minute.
Right.
Not a problem. There are just so many options available for you. But then when you're going somewhere like Alaska, where they only sail in like the summer months, or if you're going somewhere like New England, Canada, that's only sailing a couple months, or if you want a very specific ship that is sailing in a specific destination, that is when you really have to plan in advance, and booking that last minute really might not happen for you.
Yeah.
There were a few of those New England sailings that I was just looking at that only had interior guaranteed rooms left. Like literally
Right.
the whole entire ship was sailed out. I looked on multiple platforms just to be sure, like, TLN didn't have like some extra rooms on hold. Nothing. Unavailable. They had interior guaranteed rooms and that was it.
The other thing, too, specifically talking about what Taylor's saying, is that this is also why it's really great to have a travel agent in your corner who can help you decide these things. Because another thing that cruise lines do is they release a deployment schedule, which basically just means, or is an outline of where their ships are going to be at specific times throughout the year and during and which years. So like Royal Caribbean and Norwegian, well, Norwegian probably more so than any other cruise line, will release their deployments for sometimes 3 or 4 years in advance. Not necessarily mean that you can book that sailing that far in advance,
But to have an idea
but
of what's
to give
coming
you
up.
an idea of what's coming up, yes. Now, Norwegian, I'm pretty sure, you can book almost 2 or 3 years in advance.
You can book at least 2 years in advance with Norwegian. They're
now-
like the furthest out.
The downside to that, because I see this to me seems, I see this pop up more with Norwegian than any other cruise line. But there is a downside to that, and that is that sometimes they will change that deployment schedule closer to the sailing than basically what I mean is that, like, so let's say Norwegian's doing a sailing that goes around South America, right? Starts somewhere on the east coast of South America, goes down around and comes back up the west coast, whatever. Let's say it's a 21 night sailing. It's something you've been really looking forward to. You can book it 3 years in advance, and so you've been making payments on that for whatever the last 2 years. If something happens, another ship goes out of commission, and they need to dock it, and it's going to be docked for a long time and dry dock to make repairs, whatever. Norwegian sometimes will do a redeployment, and so they'll shift their ships around, and so there is times when that will happen. So that sailing you've been looking forward to might get canceled. And now what do you do? Because now you can't do that sailing because they don't have a ship that's doing that. That ship now is going to go to Alaska, or that ship's going to go to Australia. I don't know. They make those decisions, not me. But it is something to think about. I don't think it's like a real concern necessarily, but it is something you should be aware of that does occasionally happen. And it doesn't just happen with Norwegian, even though it does seem to happen to them the most. I don't know why. But Royal Caribbean has done that before, where they will have to redeploy their ships into different areas. And usually it's just mostly within the Caribbean. Like, they'll have 4 or 5 ships that are going to be sailing in the Caribbean, and, their one ship that's going to be in the Med is not going to be able to go. So then they'll take a ship from the Caribbean and they'll put it in the Med for the summertime. So something to think about.
That's
maybe
like
one disadvantage of booking that far in advance, but it is pretty rare.
I would honestly say, I think the best timeline of booking in advance for most sailings, I would say like 12 to maybe 16 months in advance. I still think booking it like 9 months in advance is still like a good time frame too. Like maybe 9 to like 16 months in advance gives you kind of like a better buffer. You're going to Caribbean and Bahamas, you're still going to get like decent pricing booking closer to that 9 month or less mark.
Right.
Just because there's so many ships sailing down there, it's a little more competitive. So the pricing can be a little bit lower. As long as it's not a brand new ship, of course.
Yeah.
Brand new ships, you want to book as far in advance as possible. That's
Right.
please note that. Brand new ship, book as soon as you can.
Yeah. And I think Alaska is always a really good example of this. But, with Disney, you want to book your Alaska cruise with Disney as soon as possible, mostly because the deposit's going to be pretty high. And then you'll have time, you'll have that opportunity to then go and make those excursions as soon as, well, no, I'm sorry, not as soon as you make the deposit, but as soon as the window opens up, you can make those excursion selections, but you don't have to pay for them up front.
Yeah.
The nice thing with...
You can always use third party through Viator too if you need to.
The other thing, though, what's nice about like Royal Caribbean or Norwegian is that the deposit is so low that when you make that booking, you're spending a very little amount on the deposit, but now you can take that extra money and spend it and get those guaranteed excursions in advance if you book far enough in advance. You know, I think dog sledding is one of those things that goes super, super quick. And if that's something you're really looking forward to, that Alaska cruise needs to be booked 12 months or more in advance of the sailing. And again, you don't have to pay that full amount up front. Think about it more as I'm going to place the deposit and then I want to book my excursions so that they're secured and then I can make more payments.
Well, another thing with that too would be like our Hawaii. So you have to think about where you're going, how much money you want to spend on that as well, because so much more just comes into play with it than just booking the cruise. So, you know, we could go on a cruise to the Caribbean and Bahamas and not do any excursions and not be upset about it.
Right.
Because we haven't been everywhere in the Caribbean and the Bahamas, but we've been down that way multiple times. So we could still just enjoy our time on the ship and not be upset if we don't get to go do a snorkel excursion or whatever.
Right.
But when you do what I would consider like a bigger trip, if you're going to like Alaska, where the excursions are going to be a lot more expensive, your cruise is going to be a lot more expensive. Same thing with like Mediterranean. Same thing with we're going to Hawaii in November. We booked these so far in advance, so that way we have time to make payments towards the cruises, but then also plan out exactly what excursions that we want to do on these trips and then start booking those and paying for those.
Right.
Because when you do book through the cruise line, you have to pay in full. I did mention Viator. It's like a third party. You don't have to pay those in full. You can have them pay later automatically. So there's definitely options to do that. But like those where you are planning on doing a lot of activities, just think for yourself financially. The further in advance I book this, the more time I have to save money to pay for the other things, but then I'm still getting the lowest price on my cruise.
Right.
So I can then spend that money on all the other things that I want to do.
Right. Yeah, so I think that's really about it. You know, one thing we did leave out is booking last minute sometimes, especially if you have to fly to get there, is going to increase your costs
like
tenfold.
Your overall trip costs.
Because just as cruising and hotels, airlines do dynamic pricing as well. So if those flights are booking up, the price of those flights is going to increase. So it's something else to keep in mind as well. You know, and again,
and get insurance directly through the airlines for your flights.
I know that we've said this multiple times, but that's why it's really important to use a travel advisor, somebody from Goldgell Getaways, or you can work one-on-one with Taylor. They are there to help you and walk you through each step of the process when booking your cruise. So, final takeaways. Book early if you care about what you want to do.
Activities, excursions, your room type.
Yeah, where you want to sleep at, where you want your location of sleeping to be at, right? So you're not right next to kids' clubs or right below the pool deck where you hear scratching chairs every morning as the crew puts it out. So, and if you're really flexible, you don't care, you're all about making the most of the situation that you're in, which is what Taylor and I find ourselves in most of the time because we book a lot of things last minute, you know, then live life on the edge and just enjoy it as much as you can. Take every little moment and just have fun. So, anything else?
No, I think that's it. You know, I could go on about cruising stuff forever.
Well, if you guys have anything else that you'd like to add, questions, comments, concerns, whatever, a topic that you'd like us to talk about when it comes to cruising, we haven't really touched on river cruising yet. Maybe at some point later on down the road, we'll talk about that again. Taylor and I would really love to be able to get on another river cruise here in the future. But with that being said, I think that's it for today on, you know, what did I say this topic was? First-time cruisers, how important is it to book in advance or something like that?
Yeah, like when you should book.
When you should book. All right,
I don't even know.
That's it, everybody. Thanks for watching. My name is Josh.
And my name is Taylor.
Bye.
Bye.